The world is watching as Donald Trump's desperate campaign to force the Federal Reserve into cutting interest rates reaches a fever pitch, and it's blowing up in his face spectacularly. In what's being called the most unprecedented assault on Fed independence in modern history, Trump is about to learn that bullying the world's most powerful central banker comes with consequences he never saw coming. Starting Wednesday, a global 36-hour monetary policy marathon will determine interest rate settings for half of the world's 10 most traded currencies. The Bank of Canada kicks things off, followed by the Federal Reserve, then the Bank of England, and finally the Bank of Japan. But all eyes are on the Fed meeting, where Trump's months of public tantrums and threats are about to meet cold economic reality. For months, Trump has waged an all-out war against Fed Chair Jerome Powell, the same Jerome Powell that Trump himself nominated in 2017. The irony is delicious and devastating. Trump has called Powell a major loser, nicknamed him "too late," and even threatened him with lawsuits over building renovations. The president has demanded Powell's resignation, questioned his competence, and suggested he might try to fire him, all while desperately begging for rate cuts to boost his economic narrative.
To my great fellow Americans, I am filled with grief and anger at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk on a college campus in Utah. Charlie inspired millions, and tonight, all who knew him and loved him are united in shock and horror. Charlie was a patriot who devoted his life to the cause of open debate and the country that he loved so much, the United States of America. He fought for liberty, democracy, justice, and the American people. He's a martyr for truth and freedom, and there's never been anyone who was so respected by youth.
This relentless assault on the Fed chair represents more than just policy disagreement. It's a fundamental attack on the independence that central banks require to function effectively. When a president publicly humiliates and threatens the person responsible for monetary policy, it sends shockwaves through financial markets and undermines the very credibility that makes American economic leadership possible. But here's where Trump's strategy has catastrophically backfired. His relentless pressure campaign has actually made it harder for the Fed to cut rates, not easier. Every time Trump opens his mouth to attack Powell, he undermines the very independence that allows the Fed to make the cuts he's demanding. It's a masterclass in self-sabotage that would be funny if it weren't so economically dangerous. The numbers tell the brutal truth of Trump's failure. Despite months of public harassment, Powell has held firm. When the Fed met in July, they voted 9-2 to keep rates steady at 4.25 to 4.5%. Even more embarrassing for Trump, the two dissenting votes came from his own appointees, Fed governors Chris Waller and Michelle Bowman, who wanted to cut rates but were overruled by Powell's majority. Trump's tantrum reached peak desperation during his extraordinary visit to the Fed building in July. In scenes not witnessed in modern American politics, the President of the United States stood beside the Fed chair, waving documents and making wild claims about construction costs, while Powell visibly shook his head in disagreement. It was political theater at its most cringeworthy, with Trump looking less like a president and more like a reality TV star having a meltdown. The visit backfired spectacularly. Markets immediately dialed back expectations for a September rate cut from 64% to just 46% after Powell's measured response to Trump's pressure. Every time Trump escalates his attacks, the market becomes more skeptical that the Fed will cave to political demands. It's the opposite of what Trump wanted, and everyone can see it. But Trump's biggest miscalculation lies in his complete misunderstanding of how Fed independence actually works. The Federal Reserve was designed specifically to resist political pressure from presidents like Trump. When he threatens Powell, when he calls him names, when he suggests firing him, he's actually strengthening the case for keeping rates higher, not lower. The Fed cannot be seen as caving to presidential demands without destroying its credibility forever. Powell has made this crystal clear in his responses. When asked if he would resign if Trump demanded it, Powell gave a stern, one-word answer: no. When Trump suggested the Fed chair was too late on rate cuts, Powell calmly explained that tariff-related uncertainty made rate cuts premature. Every Trump attack has been met with professional dignity that makes the president look increasingly unhinged. The economic data has handed Trump another humiliating defeat. Recent job market weakness should theoretically support rate cuts, but his own tariff policies are driving inflation concerns that complicate any easing. Consumer prices rose 2.9% in August, up from 2.7% in July, largely due to Trump's trade policies. He's literally created the conditions that prevent the rate cuts he's demanding. This is where Trump's economic illiteracy becomes most apparent. He claims there's virtually no inflation while his own tariffs are pushing prices higher. He demands rate cuts while implementing policies that force the Fed to keep rates elevated. He attacks Powell for being too late while creating the very conditions that make rate cuts impossible. It's economic policy as performance art, and the performance is bombing. The international implications of Trump's Fed pressure campaign are equally damaging. Central bankers from the European Union, UK, Japan, Canada, and Switzerland have all expressed support for Powell's independence. They understand what Trump apparently doesn't, that Fed credibility is crucial for global financial stability. When Trump attacks that credibility, he's not just hurting Powell, he's undermining America's position as the world's financial leader. Markets have repeatedly punished Trump's Fed interference throughout his tumultuous presidency.
The fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now.
In April, his attacks on Powell sent stocks spiraling, wiping out gains and spooking investors. When he backed off the threats, markets recovered. The message couldn't be clearer. Trump's pressure campaign is bad for the economy, bad for markets, and bad for America. The pattern of market reactions reveals a fundamental truth about investor confidence. Financial markets thrive on predictability and institutional stability. When presidents attack central bank independence, they introduce political risk into what should be technocratic decisions. This uncertainty manifests in higher volatility, reduced investment, and ultimately slower economic growth, the exact opposite of what Trump claims to want. The legal reality makes Trump's threats even more pathetic. The Supreme Court has reaffirmed that Fed chairs can only be removed for cause, meaning specific misconduct, not policy disagreements. Trump's lawyers know he can't legally fire Powell for refusing to cut rates, which makes his threats nothing more than empty bluster designed to play to his base. Trump's desperation has reached new lows with his focus on Fed building renovations. Unable to attack Powell on monetary policy grounds, Trump has resorted to complaining about construction costs and management issues. It's the equivalent of trying to fire a CEO because you don't like the office renovation. Petty, irrelevant, and embarrassing. The Bloomberg economics team has perfectly captured the absurdity of the situation. They expect the Fed to cut rates by 25 basis points, but not because economic data warrants it. Instead, they believe Powell will cut rates because markets expect it and the White House wants it, essentially doing what he sees as necessary to fend off further threats to Fed independence. Even if Powell cuts rates, it won't be because Trump's pressure worked, it will be despite it. This reveals the ultimate irony of Trump's strategy. If the Fed does cut rates this week, Trump will claim victory, but the reality is that his pressure campaign has made any cuts smaller and slower than they might have been otherwise. His attacks have forced Powell to be more cautious, not less, to avoid the appearance of political capitulation. The global context makes Trump's failure even more stark. While he's been throwing tantrums at Powell, other central banks are making measured, professional decisions about their monetary policies. The Bank of Canada and Norway are expected to cut rates based on economic fundamentals, not political pressure. The Bank of England will likely hold steady after careful analysis. The Bank of Japan continues its methodical approach to policy normalization. Only in Trump's America is monetary policy being conducted via Twitter tantrums and public humiliation campaigns. Trump's Fed pressure campaign has also revealed the limitations of his supposed business expertise. Any competent executive knows that public attacks on key partners and institutions are counterproductive. You don't get better performance by humiliating the people you need to work with. But Trump's reality TV background has taught him that conflict and drama generate attention, even when they destroy relationships and undermine objectives. The timing of Trump's latest attacks couldn't be worse for his credibility. With inflation rising partly due to his own tariff policies, with job market revisions showing weaker employment than initially reported, and with his own appointees dissenting from Fed decisions, Trump looks less like a master negotiator and more like someone who doesn't understand the basic mechanics of economic policy. Powell's dignified resistance to Trump's pressure has enhanced his reputation globally while diminishing Trump's. International observers see a Fed chair standing up to unprecedented political interference while maintaining professional standards. They see a president who appointed someone competent and then attacked him for doing his job properly. The contrast couldn't be more damaging to Trump's image as an effective leader. The market reaction to Trump's Fed interference tells the real story. Every time Trump escalates his attacks, bond yields reflect increased uncertainty about Fed independence. Stock markets sell off on fears that political interference could compromise monetary policy effectiveness. The dollar weakens as investors worry about institutional stability. Trump's pressure campaign is literally costing the American economy money. Looking ahead to the September Fed meeting, Trump faces a lose-lose situation entirely of his own making. If the Fed cuts rates, it will be despite his pressure, not because of it, and the cuts will likely be smaller than he wants. If the Fed holds steady, Trump's months of public attacks will look even more ineffective and desperate. Either way, his strategy has failed. The broader implications for American institutions are deeply troubling at this critical juncture.
We are hearing from President Trump. He is on his Truth Social platform saying that Charlie Kirk has passed away. So again, I'm going to read to you what the president said. The great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead. No one understood or had the heart of youth in the United States of America better than Charlie. He was loved and admired by all, especially me, and now he is no longer with us. Melania and my sympathies go out to his beautiful wife, Erica, and family. Charlie, we love you. So again, President Trump telling us at this hour that Charlie Kirk has died. Kirk was shot at an event at Utah Valley University earlier today, shortly after noon, according to the university. There was a single shot that rang out. He was shot in the neck, and now the President of the United States, someone that Charlie Kirk was close to, is reporting that he has died. I want to bring in Kristen Holmes. She is live for us at the White House. Again, Kristen, we're of course mourning Charlie Kirk. This is a man.
Trump's attacks on Fed independence mirror his broader assault on democratic norms and institutional integrity. When presidents can intimidate central bankers, when monetary policy becomes subject to political whims, when professional expertise is subordinated to electoral calculations, the entire foundation of economic stability crumbles. These attacks on institutional independence represent a dangerous precedent that extends far beyond monetary policy. If the Federal Reserve can be bullied into submission, what institution is safe from political interference? The judiciary, intelligence agencies, scientific bodies all become vulnerable when norms of independence are shattered. Powell's resistance to Trump's pressure represents more than just good monetary policy. It's a defense of institutional independence that's crucial for democracy itself. Every time Powell stands firm against Trump's attacks, he's protecting not just the Fed's credibility, but the principle that expertise and professionalism matter more than political theater. The international community is watching this battle with growing concern. America's allies depend on Fed independence for global financial stability. When Trump undermines that independence, he's not just hurting American interests, he's destabilizing the entire global monetary system. It's reckless behavior that confirms every worry about Trump's fitness for office. Trump's Fed pressure campaign will be remembered as one of the most counterproductive political strategies in modern American history.
Was one of the most unique and special people in the conservative movement today. What he was able to build, the people he was able to organize, was just so large and powerful. He was able to convince people to get involved in politics that might not have otherwise done so. When you look at what he did on these campuses and in these public events, thousands of people were showing up, not for a rock concert, not for a sporting event, but for American politics. He inspired all these kids to be involved in their country. This is unequivocally a good legacy. He was also a godly person. He spoke about his faith openly. He was unapologetic about his views. I think what's been said about Charlie having his hand on the finger on the pulse of the MAGA base is true. But what's also true is that he was enormously influential in that when an issue was emerging, when something was happening and people were sorting out their own views on it, how should I feel about this? Charlie was one of the first people they turned to see where's Charlie going to be on this issue, and how's he processing it, how's he analyzing it, and how does he think the young conservative should view whatever the issue happened to be. So it wasn't that he was just reflecting people, he was leading people, he was influencing people. When he did something, when he said something, when he took a stand on an issue, you can bet that people would move. And so
He identified a legitimate concern, the need for monetary policy to support economic growth, and then pursued it in exactly the wrong way. Instead of building relationships, he created conflict. Instead of enhancing his influence, he diminished it. Instead of getting what he wanted, he made it harder to achieve. This spectacular failure of leadership offers important lessons for future presidents and policymakers. The independence of key institutions isn't an obstacle to effective governance, it's a prerequisite for it. When leaders respect institutional boundaries and work within established norms, they can achieve far more than through confrontation and coercion. The real tragedy is that Trump's attacks have made rational monetary policy more difficult just when the economy needs it most. With global uncertainty rising, with trade tensions escalating, with labor markets softening, America needs a Fed that can respond flexibly to changing conditions. Trump's pressure campaign has forced Powell to be more rigid, not more flexible, to maintain credibility. As this global monetary policy marathon unfolds, the contrast between professional central banking and Trump's political theater will be on full display. Other central banks will make careful, data-driven decisions based on economic fundamentals. The Fed will have to navigate not just economic challenges, but political interference that has no parallel in other major economies. Trump's Fed pressure campaign represents everything wrong with his approach to governance. The belief that public attacks substitute for private diplomacy, that humiliation motivates better performance, that institutional norms are obstacles to overcome rather than foundations to respect. It's a case study in how not to exercise presidential power. The ultimate irony is that Trump's pressure campaign has achieved the exact opposite of what he intended. Instead of forcing faster rate cuts, he's slowed them down. Instead of enhancing his economic credibility, he's damaged it. Instead of demonstrating strength, he's revealed weakness. It's a masterclass in political self-sabotage that will be studied for decades. As we await the Fed's decision, one thing is certain. Whatever Powell decides will be based on economic analysis, not political pressure. Trump's months of tantrums and threats have failed to move the needle on monetary policy, but they've succeeded in making him look desperate, unprofessional, and ineffective. That's not the image of strength he was trying to project, but it's the reality he's created through his own poor judgment and worse execution.